What if playing it completely safe with your money in your mid-30s is actually the single highest risk decision you will ever make? Most people reaching 35 believe they are doing everything right by playing defense, clinging tightly to traditional savings, and avoiding every possible market wave. But they are unknowingly walking straight into a hidden financial trap, a silent, creeping decay that slowly erodes decades of hard work. If you do not catch this invisible mistake right now, the gap between where you are and where you could be will widen until it is mathematically impossible to bridge. But the single thought shift that changes everything isn't about working harder, and it isn't about taking wild, reckless gambles. It is something far more surprising. Stay right here. Because over the next few minutes, we are going to unlock a completely new framework that permanently changes how you view risk, security, and true long-term wealth. Let us begin with a simple, unsettling reality about how most people handle money once they reach their mid-30s. By 35, a quiet transformation happens inside the human mind. The raw, aggressive ambition of your 20s starts giving way to a natural desire for comfort, stability, and preservation. You look at your income, your family, your obligations, and your brain whispers a single, convincing lie. Protect what you have at all costs, so you stack cash in traditional accounts. You avoid volatility like the plague, and you pat yourself on the back for being responsible. But here is the brutal truth. That feeling of safety is nothing more than an optical illusion, a psychological trick played on you by your own mind. When you sit on static cash, you are not standing still. You are steadily sinking backward under the weight of unseen forces like monetary inflation and lost compound growth. To understand why this happens and how to fix it, we have to look at one of the most remarkable business turnarounds in modern corporate history. A case study that completely flips traditional wisdom on its head. Back in the early 2000s, a massive retail legacy giant was rapidly collapsing under its own weight. Slowly dying because its management was obsessed with protecting what they already owned. They had thousands of physical stores, millions of loyal, aging customers, and a massive real estate footprint across the nation. Board members sat in air-conditioned conference rooms, convincing themselves that holding steady was the safest path. They refused to invest heavily in modern supply chain technology or digital infrastructure because it felt too risky, too volatile, and too expensive. Meanwhile, a tiny, relentless online competitor was burning cash, taking calculated risks, and building a completely frictionless logistics system from scratch. The traditional board thought they were playing it safe. But in reality, their refusal to embrace controlled risk was executing a slow, painful death sentence on their entire enterprise. Within a decade, that massive legacy giant went completely bankrupt, erasing billions in value while the bold, risk-engineered competitor grew into a multi-trillion-dollar engine. This brings us directly to our first massive realization. Protecting what you have without growing it isn't safety, it is guaranteed slow-motion destruction. When you turn 35, your greatest asset isn't actually the balance in your account. It is your remaining horizon of active capital deployment. If you treat your portfolio like that dying legacy retailer, keeping everything locked away in stagnant, low-yielding spaces, you are committing the exact same strategic error on a personal level. You think you are protecting yourself from a short-term market drop, but what you are actually doing is guarantees long-term financial fragility. So, how do top-tier investors avoid this exact trap? They make one fundamental, game-changing thought shift. They stop asking, "How do I avoid losing money?" and start asking, "How do I engineer asymmetric downside while maximizing upside?" Consider the story of a middle-aged professional named David, a 36-year-old manager who thought he was making every right move. David saved 20% of his paycheck, kept it in safe, low-interest vehicles, and completely avoided investing in dynamic assets because he feared a potential market crash. Every night, David slept soundly, believing his money was completely protected. Then, 5 years passed. Cost of living surged, purchasing power plummeted, and David realized something terrifying. His safe portfolio could no longer buy what it used to. He hadn't lost money in nominal terms, but in real terms, he had lost nearly a quarter of his life's accumulated energy. That was the exact moment David realized he needed a radically different strategy. He needed to adopt the exact mental model used by world-class venture capitalists and elite wealth builders. Elite investors do not try to predict the future. They build systems that thrive regardless of market chaos. Instead of avoiding risk, they manage risk through asymmetry, ensuring that when they are wrong, they lose very little, but when they are right, the returns pay for dozens of small mistakes. Think about how high-growth businesses expand their economic moats. They do not bet everything on a single, uncertain product line. Instead, they allocate small, controlled portions of capital toward dynamic experiments while keeping their core foundation rock solid. If an experiment fails, the downside is strictly capped and easily absorbed by the business, but if an experiment succeeds, it explodes into a massive, compounding revenue stream that carries the company for decades. This is the exact shift you must make in your personal portfolio at 35, moving away from passive preservation and stepping directly into active, asymmetric growth. When you look at your overall balance sheet, ask yourself, how much of my capital is actively working as a growth engine and how much is simply sitting dormant out of fear? If 90% of your wealth is sitting completely stagnant, you aren't managing risk, you are simply delaying a painful realization. To build true, generational momentum, you must view every dollar not as a measure of comfort but as an active employee whose sole job is to buy back your future time. When you shift your baseline metric from short-term account stability to long-term purchasing power velocity, the entire game changes. You no longer panic when markets swing, because you understand that short-term volatility is simply the entry fee for long-term compound performance. You stop trying to time every top and bottom, and instead focus entirely on building a disciplined, automated system that continuously accumulates productive assets over time. This simple, powerful pivot eliminates the constant emotional anxiety of managing money, allowing you to act with supreme clarity while everyone else is driven by panic or greed. The choice you face today is incredibly simple, but its consequences will ripple through every single year of your future. You can continue down the comfortable path, playing total defense, guarding stagnant capital, and watching your future purchasing power slowly wither away in silence. Or you can execute this fundamental thought shift today, embrace controlled, calculated asymmetry, and turn your money into a self-sustaining engine of freedom. The decision is entirely yours. But remember, time is the one asset you can never buy back once it and turn your money into a self-sustaining engine of freedom. The decision is entirely yours. But remember, time is the one asset you can never buy back once it